it's really difficult to raise children in a state that's trying to make laws against your friends, your family, and the toll that it takes waking up every morning looking at the news to see what type of rights they're trying to take away from you today.
Welcome to the Unaparent podcast, the place that delivers deeply human stories about the unapparent truths of parenting. My name is Katia Reguero Lindor, and I am your host. Join us as we debunk myths surrounding parenthood and provide an empathetic, judgment-free space for parents and parents-to-be. We hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Unaparent podcast. Today's guests are two fathers that I am so excited to talk to today. I came across an Instagram post of theirs. I believe my sister-in-law actually came across it and sent it to me. And I quickly realized it was something I really was, it made me pause really and think. And I told my producer, Marina, I'm like, wouldn't it be so awesome if we could have them on our show? And so, here you are today. Thank you so much, Jake and Tom, for being on our episode today.
Thanks for having us. Really excited to be here.
Could you introduce yourselves briefly, please, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. So I'm Jake Kleinmahon. I'm actually originally from New York. I'm from Westchester. And I moved down to New Orleans for medical school. I went to Tulane for medical school. And then after that, I did training in Colorado, and then we moved back to New Orleans. And I took over as the director of pediatric heart transplant for the hospital system down there. And this is Tom.
Yep. I'm Tom. I grew up in Michigan. First 22 years of my life, and then moved down to New Orleans just prior to Hurricane Katrina. So that was a real eye-opener for me. And then met Jake about a decade later. Like he said, we moved to Denver for 4 years, back to New Orleans for 5 years, and then back up here to New York.
Very cool. Yeah, I have friends from New Orleans, and I remember Katrina because of that, especially because I knew people from there at the time. And how did you two meet, if you don't mind telling us?
Sure. So we actually met playing softball in a gay softball league in New Orleans.
Very cool.
It was a great way to meet friends. We were both on different teams, and then started dating, and we were on the same team after that. But very strongly recommend gay sports leagues. It's how we joined one as soon as we went to Denver as well. And it's how we met, a lot of our friends and a lot of the people that we really leaned on in Denver to help us raise our daughter. Very
cool. And so you have one or two kids?
We have two kids, Isabel and Connor. Isabel's 7. Connor will be 5 next month. We had Isabel when I was in fellowship, so one of the hardest times of my life. And then we moved to New Orleans, and I had Connor there. But as Tom's saying, and we were talking about this earlier, we didn't have any family in New Orleans, at least biological family. So a lot of the people that we surrounded ourselves both in New Orleans and Denver were actually people that we met through gay sports leagues. And Isabel was probably about 2 weeks old when she came to one of our first flag football games.
Sounds like my kids who go to sports events since the time they're like 5 days old. So yeah, Sounds about right. They get acclimated really quickly. So the post specifically that drew me to your Instagram, I want to read the caption really quickly so we can go into some of the topics that I feel really would help listeners open their eyes the way it forced me to do when I read your post, right? So it says, when I came back to Louisiana almost exactly 5 years ago, I came with the goal of building one of the highest quality pediatric heart transplant, heart failure, and ventricular assist programs in the country. I felt that kids in Louisiana should be able to get the same quality healthcare as any other child in the United States. We have been quite successful, and I am so proud of what we've built. My plan had been to stay at my current institution until I retired. However, over the last year, Tom and I have watched state legislatures across the South pass anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. Louisiana's last legislative session was no different. While they failed to override the governor's veto and 2 of the 3 bills, the message is very clear. Tom and I have discussed at length the benefits of continuing to live in the South, as well as the toll that it takes on our family. Because of this, we are leaving Louisiana. Our children come first. We cannot continue to raise them in this environment. Wow. That is heavy because, it was sort of a choice forced onto you, right? Because again, as parents, I'm sure we all understand our children come first. And so when it's a matter of choosing between their well-being and anything else, we're going to always choose their well-being. So I can imagine, despite that, the difficulties that came with making said decision. So if you don't mind, take us back to that moment. What were some of the questions you were facing? The particular difficulties you discussed, and the pros and cons that you had to weigh.
Yeah. Well, we have 2 biological children. I have a lot of other children, and those are the children that I have spent my career dedicated to taking care of. And by far, one of the hardest parts about this decision was leaving those patients and those families that have become like family to me. Yeah, and kind of what care would look like after that. I was one of 3 pediatric heart transplant cardiologists in the state, and running the only pediatric heart transplant program in the state. So that certainly weighed heavily on me. I certainly got a lot of comments like, what about the kids of Louisiana? Don't they deserve health care too? Are these laws really affecting your family? And just comments that really didn't recognize that although I'm a doctor, we're a family and we're humans. And it's really difficult to raise children in a state that's trying to make laws against your friends, your family, and the toll that it takes waking up every morning, looking at the news to see what type of rights they're trying to take away from you today.
Yeah, and we had a discussion after we decided it, kind of with our kids, explaining, why we were doing it and some of the laws and how they would affect our families and affect her school and affect his school. And, we said something along the lines of, sometimes you don't have a choice, and you just got to do what you have to do. And our daughter, who was 6 at the time, looked at us and said, you always have a choice. It's just one of them's really bad. Which, you could tell when, a 6-year-old looks at you and she gets it, and just, it was the right choice for our family for sure. And you can just tell, right, from her opinion and her perspective, that just the laws they were looking to pass just weren't kind, right? They weren't kind to our family. And, we had to do something about that to keep ourselves and our family safe.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's wild to think that a 6-year-old gets it and so many other people don't, right? It's like, it's
Yes.
hard to comprehend, really.
Yes.
So you guys currently are in New York, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yep. We're on Long Island.
Okay, cool. I live in New York part of the year. So I was curious about how life has changed, for better or for worse, but hopefully for better, right? That was the reason for the move. For your family particularly, some of maybe the stark differences between Louisiana and New York that you guys have experienced.
It's been great. I did realize that I moved to the South originally because I didn't love cold weather. But besides that, for our family and also me professionally, it's really been great. We are in a state that supports us and supports our family. Our kids, had a seamless transition from New Orleans to here. Besides them talking about crawfish or Mardi Gras and things like that, you would never know that they had just moved here 6 months ago. So we're very fortunate to also have made friends and have a network of people already that support us.
Yeah, and the the school system here is great, and so we got to go from kind of a private school system or a private school in New Orleans where you had to apply and get on the wait list, and it was kind of stressful to get in, into to a really great public school where all you had to do was live here and prove you lived here. And so that really made it was a very stark difference in our mind on that front, and it made that transition a little bit easier. And then, yeah, as far as work goes for Jake, he seems really supported here, and my work was extreme. So I am a chemical engineer, and when I told my boss what was going on, he very quickly called his boss, and within 10 minutes of me kind of updating him on the situation, was like, great, wherever you can work remotely that your family feels safe, we will make it work for you. And so from that aspect, I don't get to go to the office as much and see people, but from a support aspect, it truly was seamless on my end.
That's good.
We left a lot of friends, right? I moved down in 2005, Jake moved down in 2007, and so we had a lot of friends there, right? A lot of friends that we pretty much considered family. We'd have them over for dinner. The kids call them aunt and uncle.
It was your village, right?
Kids. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And so we left that, and so that's hard to rebuild. And so that's for sure the biggest hurdle that we're kind of working over. And as Jake alluded to, we've started to make friends here, and some really good friends. But that time is just, you need time to make those friendships.
Yeah, no, that takes time, especially, friendships that align with your values, your family. I mean, as adults, it becomes increasingly harder as it is, but then as parents, even more so. And then I'm sure for you guys as parents with demanding careers, even more so. So I can definitely, sympathize with how hard it is to find community, and then leave that community that you've been able to build, and then start anew, basically at a new place. So yeah, that must be difficult. For me, it was sort of the same. My family lives in Puerto Rico for the most part, and even though my husband's family lives part of the year in Florida where we live, when I became a new mom, I felt like I didn't have community, because I didn't know a lot of people in the area. I didn't have a lot of mom friends at the time. My parents were far. And so it can feel very isolating when you feel like you're going through this experience alone, right? You have your partner, but other than that, it can feel really, really isolating. So that's one of the main reasons I started this podcast. I mentioned that a lot on my episodes, because it's a reason for it, and it reaffirms what a good choice that was to start this platform and build my own community in this way, even though, physically, maybe we're far away, but I feel like listeners that otherwise wouldn't know that they're heard, and that they can relate, and that, they can learn, and just feel like a community at a distance. The village is everything, and sometimes we don't have a village nearby, and these kinds of topics and conversations are helpful to people. So again, yeah, thank you for being here with us and talking about all of this. I'm curious to know for people who I'm sure it would be valuable for them to know as well, what other difficulties have you guys experienced as a same-sex couple, whether in different states or even in New York?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think overall we're very fortunate in that we've had almost all positive experiences. There are the things like when you fill out forms, it's usually mother and father, or when our kids were in diapers trying to find a men's room that had a changing table. It's very difficult. We also have to be thoughtful about where we travel. and what hotels that we stay at, because we need to be comfortable where we are, and not every place, even in the United States, is really safe for us to go. So those kinds of decisions are certainly at least a little bit more challenging. We certainly always worry a little bit about our kids and how they're going to be treated at school. And fortunately, we've had incredible teachers, administrators, friends in their class. It hasn't been a problem.
Yeah, and one of the things from the very get-go of having kids, right, as a two male couple, right, as a gay couple, was parental leave. When our daughter was born, neither one of us had parental leave. So I took 3 days, which was the maximum I could take without a doctor's note. And Jake, I think, took 1. And thankfully, his mom came in and stayed with us for almost 6 weeks. And so that's the kind of thing that really you notice when there isn't a mom, that maternity leave is so valuable. Thankfully, my company changed their policy in between when we had our daughter and our son. And so I had 8 weeks off. And the difference was just astounding, right? Like you don't have to worry about work. You can just focus on raising this brand new child. So
I think I took 4 days for him.
4 days. Yeah.
Well, a little bit better than 1, right? But that's still wildly just deficient of our society. That's all we give parents, you know. I talk about also a lot how moms don't get enough time, because it's a time when you're I know it varies. Some people get more than others, but like 3 months seems to be like the bare minimum that both parents should get, I think. And I definitely feel that our second child was born while my husband was in season, and so technically all he got was 3 days, but he didn't even take the 3 days. He actually went to work the day I gave birth. I had a home birth, so he was up all night with me at home and then went to the stadium, and his coach was like, "You're not playing today. You were up all night. You didn't sleep." And he's like, "No, I'm here. I'm ready to play." And they were like, "No, you got to sit this one out." But he was ready to play. So, and that was fine. It was our second child. I always say it would have been so different if it had been our first, where we're both learning to be new parents at the same time. And it's kind of like, you're leaving me and I don't know what I'm doing, you know. But thankfully our first daughter was born in the off season. So he got, significant amount of time with her as a newborn. And that's just, it really makes all the difference, when both parents can have time with their children at such a early stage. It's pretty vital, I would say. And it's people, I guess, don't take that into consideration when it's two dads. It's like, what do you do? It's mothers at least get more time than fathers usually. And going back to the changing table, I've always said, what do two male couples, what do they do to change diapers? Granted, I don't always change diapers, and I don't go to the stalls. Sometimes the women's lines are way too long and whatever, and I'm just like, you know what, I'm gonna do it right here, and I do it wherever I can. But ideally, you would have a space for that, right? There is a space for both parents, and so also my husband is a great diaper changer, and I'm like, that's sometimes it's his job to do it. And when we were in Italy this past November, we went to a tennis match, and there was no changing table in any of the bathrooms I went to. And I was like, try the men's. Maybe they have one in the men's. And they did. And I was like, oh, amazing. I can get used to this also from my side, because it's always the default parent is usually the mom. And so they're only thinking about, oh, women need this. And then when there isn't a changing table in either, I'm like, well, they didn't even think about parents at all. Like they altogether just disregarded parents.
Yep.
So yeah, these are like, they sound maybe like small details, but it's huge, because it really informs like what society values and who they're thinking about when they put systems and things like bathrooms in place.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's unneeded stress in a already stressful part of your life where you're just trying to be a parent and
Yeah.
sometimes work and sometimes just finding a place to change your kid's diaper is the last straw.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the thing that maybe people who aren't parents hear it and they're like, it's not a big deal. But it's like, again, everything we go through, and then, as you said, it's the last straw. Like, the least you can do is have a changing stable in this bathroom, public bathroom.
Yes. I will say one of the benefits of being a gay couple is that when people see like one of us with both kids, they assume that we're kind of like a hapless dad who is like taking their kids for some stroll so mom can get some rest, and they're very helpful, right? Like, I've had people offer to watch my bags at the airport while I go change them, and like they're just like, oh, what can I do to help? And so, you know, sometimes the stereotype helps us.
Yeah, that's nice. I'm glad it does. It's always I find, I choose to laugh at it, but I'm like, moms don't get congratulated for changing diapers.
No, they
like, that's
don't.
kind of what they assume is our job, right? And so it's funny because when they see my husband doing it, they're like, oh my god. Like, I'm sure they assume, is he a single dad, or like, why is he by himself with a child? And I'm like, I went to the bathroom and he changed the diaper. Like,
Right.
why is
Like,
that
he should
so
get an
out
award.
of the norm? So do you tend to find that people are a little more socially acceptable, or they are accepting of same-sex female couples who raise children together, or is that kind of the same sort of discrepancies?
I would guess it's very similar discrepancies. I think the only potential difference would be kind of like people assume that like they would say, hey, take this home to your mom and have it signed, right? But I think that's kind of those little details are probably the difference there.
Yeah, I mean, I hear it all the time, where someone's like, oh yeah, make sure that we call their, have we talk to their mom. I'm just assuming that like the mom is going to be the person that's in charge of things, makes the decision maker. And I have to remind people that, it may be mom, it may be a grandmother, it may be an aunt, it may be a dad. So we can't just assume these things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that there's probably a lot of layers to that, including, the sexism that is just, gender roles are just, things are so gendered still in this day and age, right? Even when you actively try for them not to be, that's just like the way things are sometimes. And so, I'm curious, with you two both being working, right, parents, what is your like childcare situation, or how do you divide your parenting roles since you both work and you're both dads, and all of the things that and that entails?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I would say 70% of it falls on Tom. There are many times where I leave before the kids get out and going in the morning. I'm home. I try to make it home for dinner every night. But certainly I'm just coming in the door as he's got dinner made and somehow has the kids like peaceful and doing things. But it's hard. We are fortunate that he works from home, and his job is a lot more flexible than I am.
Yeah. Yeah, my job is fortunately kind of, especially after COVID, right? They are much more flexible in hours, and so I just block the time in my, work calendar where it says, "Hey, get kids ready for school," right? Pick kids up from school, and so I also really enjoy doing that, and so I don't mind bumping things a little bit earlier. But we did, since we've moved to New Orleans, we have someone show up
To New York.
to New York. Thank you.
From New Orleans to New York.
From
Got
New
it.
Orleans,
Yeah.
yes. In the afternoon, because our daughter's school ends fairly early. And so he shows up and does her homework with her and just kind of like plays and interacts, and they do different crafts until my workday ends, which is a huge, huge help.
New Orleans, sometimes we'd have to ask friends to pick up one of the kids or both the kids, or take him to school in the morning if I had an early meeting and he was out of town. here, one of the benefits of moving here is my parents also live on Long Island. And so he was out of town last week, and mom came and helped with the kids. But it's a challenge. I'm very fortunate that he kind of runs our calendar, and seems to always have it planned. But it's difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I mean, for me at least, having my parents, when they come visit, it's such a relief. Just knowing that I know my kids are taken care of. It's kind of like unspoken. I don't have to ask for specific things because they're your parents. They know, and especially my mom who raised us. For the most part, she was the default parent, and I know when both my parents are here, it's it's wonderful that there's like one for each kid, right? I'm like, my dad will be playing with one of them, my mom will be with the baby or the toddler. And that's so comforting when parents can be around. And that's one of the things that I talk about too, how nowadays it's so common to really raise kids without a village or far from your village. And the expectations are just so high on parents to be productive and continue to do their thing, but raise kids well. And it's like all of this without a village many times. And that's so hard when you don't have your community of people around you who you trust. It's not like people think it sounds easy, like, oh yeah, just leave your kid with a nanny. And it's like, I mean, on paper, that sounds pretty simple, but it's who do you trust with your kids? How tedious is the process of finding, a babysitter that I trust with my kids? And are my parents near? Can they help? And all of these questions and stressors come up that just, until you've been there, you don't really, get it. But I'm sure you guys can relate. And additional to regular parenting stressors, is there something or several things that are particularly stressful to you as a family that probably to me might not be?
I think one of the things that's just unique about my job is just how unpredictable it is.
Yeah, the hours and...
Yeah, I mean, I may say that I'm leaving and then I get a call to the emergency room and I'm home 2 hours later, or I'm on call, or we have a transplant in the middle of the night. And, I usually try to guess what time I'm going to be home, fully knowing that it's probably going to be 2 to 4 hours after whatever time I guess. Tom has some formula in his head, I think, to figure out what time I'll actually be home. But it's difficult.
Sorry, Tom, if you were going to say something, feel free.
No, I was just going to say, fortunately, what Jake does is very impactful. And so at first, when he would leave, our daughter, who's more emotional, would kind of get upset and be like, when's he going to get home? I'm worried about him. And, when we kind of explained why he was gone and that he was helping these kids and that without him, they'd be in real trouble. And she's like, okay, I get it. That's important too. And it was like, okay, phew. At least now we don't have to deal with like a crying child in addition to Jake's schedule, right? And so it's really great that the reason is a very understandable one for a kid, right? You're going to help one of my potential friends kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, for a sensitive kid, right? That is definitely...
Yes.
Yeah, she's empathetic. Obviously, I can tell just from, those stories you're telling me about her. And the fact that she gets it is already, I think, it alleviates a little bit of that stress, right? I'm still in a stage where our oldest daughter, she's 3, and she still doesn't really get why her dad leaves, and it's hard because she cries, and you try to explain it to her, and she's like, but why can't I go with him? Like, I want to go to the baseball field, I want to go bat with him. And it's a little harder at this stage to explain to them, why. And
yeah.
So even though she's really smart, it's still like she wants her dad around. So understandably, she gets upset. But yeah, it's so sweet that I'm sure she sees her, one of her daddies as the superhero that's doing, great work. And so it's all like, it's understandable, right? It's definitely worth it. So that's sweet. And has being a pediatric, right, cardiologist, has that changed in any way your outlook on parenting or any of that?
I would say reverse. I think being a parent has changed the way that I practice medicine.
Okay.
Connor was basically stopped eating when he was 4 years old, or 4 months old. Required a feeding tube for 6 months of the first year of his life. And I think back to how I used to talk to families about feeding issues, and I probably didn't sound very empathetic. So having children has really made me, and being a parent has made me be really thoughtful to what it's like to be a parent. I talk about some really difficult things with families sometimes, and for me, it's routine. And you hope that it's for your doctor, it's routine. But for a parent, it's not routine at all. And I try to make that really clear to them, that I may talk about it like it's my job, because it is, but there's so much that I think about behind the decisions that I make, and oftentimes think about my own children and how I would treat patients.
Yeah, and it has changed the other way too. When Jake sees something, right, some kid gets hurt and he has to deal with them, we all hear about it and, take action, right? So we had a pool in New Orleans because it was hot. And in between, so the pool had a cover that automatically closed and could hold a car. We had a fence with a lock. We had a door with 3 locks. One of them was automatic, and it had an alarm, all between our house and the pool. And so those were the things where he's like, we're going to have a pool, but we are absolutely doing it safely, right? Here are all the barriers we're going to have in place. We had a sign that said, did you close the door? Did you cover the pool? Did you lock the door in the window? Right. So you had to see it as you left. And so those are the kind of things where like he picks it up like someone else's tragedy. We're not going to repeat that. We're going to learn from it, and we're going to try and avoid it as much as we can.
Yeah. Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
The nature of your profession is really like, on a personal level, I can't imagine how you can separate, the heaviness of what I'm sure you see sometimes. And that's really admirable I always admire, doctors that can do that. But empathetic doctors always make the best doctors, in my opinion, and I'm sure that, parenting just shifts your entire view on life, right? So I
Sure does.
I can't imagine how it won't, no matter what your job is, it's going to shift your view on it, just out of the sheer fact that something so earth-shattering in all the best ways, like becoming a parent, come into play, and all of the factors that come into that. So yes, I can't imagine. I don't think I asked you specifically earlier, right? But I do, I guess if you don't mind sharing, some of the specific challenges you faced when you guys decided that you wanted to become parents, like starting the family. What were some challenges that you guys faced?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, and we probably started the process 10 years ago, 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there. There just weren't really any resources for same-sex parents. We were the first gay couple to go through our surrogacy agency. And like the forms, we had to call them and be like, who do you want to, who goes where? Fortunately now there are a lot more resources out there. People reach out to us to kind of hear about our journey and why we did surrogacy instead of adoption or other ways of having kids. And a lot of it is personal. One of the things I've learned over the years is you love your kid no matter who they are, and no matter how they come to you. But that was certainly a challenge trying to kind of navigate that situation.
Yeah, and it's just long. right? There's waiting periods of, 6 months for this thing, and you have to get on a waiting list for that. And so kind of trying to coordinate things and navigate things was difficult. Um, and then we, obviously with pregnancy, we had some difficult times there too. And so some health issues and, that's draining. And we're not even the one carrying the baby, right? Like we're either FaceTiming in or we're attending OBGYN appointments. And it's like, oh man, now what? What's going to be next? And so those were definitely emotional and draining times for sure.
Again, becoming a parent is just, it's changes your world entirely.
Yes.
Yes. For better mostly, but that doesn't mean it doesn't bring, its challenges with it. And particularly for same-sex couples, when you, especially in a time when resources were so scarce, the difficulties were just piled onto that. I can imagine. So some more parenting topics I wanted to bring out. These are a little more general, like what are some, the famous saying, pick your battles, right? They say that with relationships as well as with your kids. And so I was wondering, what are some battles that you are like non-negotiable that you will for sure decide to have with your kids? Like
kindness is probably the number one thing. If they're not kind to others, that is a non-negotiable thing.
right.
We want to raise our kids to be kind and caring and thoughtful individuals who are friends with anyone and everyone. They're accepting of anyone and everyone, regardless of any type of demographic that you could think of. Fortunately, it's I can't really think of times besides between themselves with them being unkind, but that's certainly a non-negotiable.
And then other things, right? Like safety, right? Our son complains that his car seat is too tight. And you're like, well, I don't know what to tell you, buddy. Like, that's just the rules. You have to have, if it's for your safety, we're not debating it. Like, you will tighten your car seat. You can complain all you want, but this is just how it's going to be. Or when we lived in New Orleans, we didn't have a yard. And so they weren't allowed outside without an adult. You're not allowed by the pool without an adult. Things like that keep them safe as well, right? Those are definitely non-negotiables. Whereas, bedtime or can we watch a show or what they're going to eat at dinner, much, much more negotiable. Those are battles that we often lose.
Respect is another big thing for me. Our children are expected to be respectful, even if they don't agree with something, to talk about it. So that's something that when we talk about frequently that teachers have these hopes and dreams conferences about what you want your child to learn this year or to do this year, and the things that we talk about are we want them to be kind, we want them to be respect, we want them to be happy, and the learning, if they're doing those things, then the learning will come.
Tom, were you going to say something?
No, I was in full agreement with that. Like those conferences, while they might seem silly when our kids are so young, I guess it gives us a chance to emphasize with the teachers, right? It is truly like whatever they want to do, we trust them to teach our kids, but our kids need to be kind to others and kind to the teacher and respect the teacher. And if they aren't, we want to hear about it, right? If our kid is bullying someone or being disrespectful to teachers, we need to hear about that so we can intervene soon, right?
Right. Yeah, that's really cool that they offer that space for parents to kind of emphasize what their values are, for their kids. Because, for example, I was homeschooled, and so my mom was able to do that personally. And I've always thought, for people who can't do that, that's not their reality, right? Or don't want to, right? For sure, totally understand parents who wouldn't want to do that. It's hard. But you want to make sure that your kids are learning the values that you want to instill in them, despite it being around other people, and you can't really control what they're going to pick up or learn from other kids. But I think the job you do at home is so important, and it will speak to also, you know, how they go out into the world. And then if there's teachers that are willing to kind of promote that as well, that's amazing. That's such a game changer. Okay, I know you guys are super busy, and as it is the time you've dedicated to today, I'm so grateful for it. I want to ask, are there any parting words, whether anything you want people to know or understand or be better at? Please say that before we part.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I feel that has been lost a little bit in this country is thinking about each other, helping out your neighbor, being kind, having differences of opinion, but being able to talk about them. Those are things that are important to us to hope to understand more about people who don't look like you, don't come from the same place as you, speak a different language. I think those are all really important things that, kindness and compassion, they cost nothing. And if anything, they give to you. And so it is so, when I see people being hateful, I just don't understand it, because it may make them feel good, kind of during that raw moment, but it doesn't make people feel good in the end. So if we do things that are led by our heart and led by working with one another, we're all trying to get through this life as best we can, but we need our communities to support us.
I'd say, I guess, empathy goes a long way. Right? Give people the benefit of the doubt before you yell at someone, before you kind of curse under your breath, take a step back and think, well, why did they do that, right? Like, there's probably a good reason. Give them the benefit of the doubt if it's not someone who is consistently behaving that way. And it'll make everyone feel better. You don't get into an argument, and things are happier when you give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yes. Oh, amen to that. And I second everything you guys said. And it's, as you said, kindness and empathy, it costs nothing. And not only that, you don't have to understand something or agree with it to accept it. I think you just it's really, really, really so important for people to learn to just be accepting, and that just comes from empathy, I think, from having, a kind heart and just wanting people to be happy, if they're being productive members of society, not ruining the planet and not ruining, not being mean to people. Why do you have a problem with anything?
Yes, agreed.
So it's pretty simple, basic matters that seem to be so twisted and complex in this day and age. But, I think get back to basics, right? As you say, just teach compassion and kindness, and that'll go a long way.
If you make a mistake, apologize.
Right.
We all make mistakes. It's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And especially as a parent, we make a lot of mistakes.
A lot of mistakes.
I think every day we have to. Right. And that's being a parent also brings that humility of being able to accept, like, man, I messed up, and I got to apologize now to my 3-year-old for losing my temper.
I'm a pediatrician. I'm supposed to be trained to take care of kids. I thought that would translate into being a parent. It does not.
Nope. It's a whole other ball game.
Yes.
All right, guys. Well, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your words of wisdom. And, I appreciate you. Until next time.
Yes. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate your time.
Yes. Thanks for having us.
Gracias, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Unaparent podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe as we release a new episode at least every month with an exciting new guest. Be sure to also follow us on Instagram for all the Unaparent content you never knew you needed.